right. Well, I have some guests from New York City today, Joshua Fouts and Rita King. Thanks for joining me. I know your time is valuable.
Thanks for having us.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves and maybe give me a hint about what brings you to Bioneers. That's our common link today, Bioneers.
Well, my name is Rita J. King. I am the creator of a conceptual framework called the Imagination Age. And for the past 5 years and longer before that, it is an idea that I came up with that we need to look at these decades in between the fading industrial era and the impending hybrid reality differently. And so I call it the Imagination Age because I believe it's a period of redesign of our systems that we are working on collaboratively. And imagination doesn't mean that it's something you do alone in your mind. It means that we now have the technology to share globally our ideas and to see which ones can stick and which ones should be dismissed. And so I believe that technology is a prism held up to the bright beam of the imagination, that humans can partner with technology and collaborate with technology instead of looking at it as other. And Josh and I have been collaborating since 2007 on a variety of projects in this vein. And now we're both working at Science House. I'm the Executive Vice President for Business Development at Science House. And this time period now is the first time that the Imagination Age has become practiced and tangible rather than just a theoretical framework. So Bioneers is an amazing opportunity to share this idea and this framework with people who are aware that we share a tiny blue planet and that we have to find a way to maximize that so that we can continue our species and all of the other species on the planet.
My name is Joshua Fouts. I'm Rita J. King's collaborator. We've been working together since 2007, exploring some novel and creative ways to use digital culture and storytelling to help build better understanding between cultures. And as Rita mentioned, a couple of months ago, we actually joined a company called Science House, and I have come on board as the executive director of Science House Foundation, which works to spark the imagination of students around the world toward an interest in science and mathematics.
Interesting. One of my struggles is trying to bring science and the mythic or science and the spiritual together to frame and to promote what I call the permaculture age. It's interesting that you call it the imagination age. Well, we're both basically in the same age. How nice. What a triad we are.
Age. I like it. You can call it whatever you like. It's just a little fleeting period between two longer eras. And I'm with you on bringing together science and culture. It's always been my interest since I was a child. I had a very pivotal day in my childhood when my father let me skip school and go with him. He was a student at the time at Columbia University. He's a disabled Vietnam vet, and he was going back to school, later in his life. And we had a couple of pivotal experiences that day that brought science and art and culture full circle for me in my imagination. So first he took me to a class where we watched a French film, a black and white drama, with subtitles, and I just thought it was the greatest thing I ever saw in my entire life, and it opened up a world to me, a macro world beyond my experience, and I just was in a daze. Then we went and had lunch at a Chinese restaurant, and I learned how to eat with chopsticks, and then we went to this physics class, where I remember his professor started talking about quarks, up quarks, down quarks, charms, strains, and I thought, oh my God. So first I realized there was an entire world beyond New York City, and then I realized there was an entire microscopic subatomic world in one day. And so ever since then, that's been my main focus, those things.
Well, Joshua, how does Science House place policy towards the combination of science and the mystic rather?
Well, I think one of the things that really excited both Rita and me about Science House was the fact that they were committed to the arts and creativity and really sparking the imagination of students worldwide in understanding the excitement of science. And I think if you think about science through the prism of imagination and creativity, it actually opens up a whole new universe, if you will, to the mythos of science, and both the foundational myths that our cultures have developed over so many years. And if you think about high-end science, a couple weeks ago we went to the World Science Festival here in Manhattan, and there was a panel of quantum physicists. And the quantum physicists who were all trained mathematicians and then got their PhD in physics, ended up having a conversation that was so esoteric and so based in sort of foundational conceptions about the mythology of the cosmos that I wondered if we were even talking about science anymore. And it's what made it so exciting. They've measured the rate of expansion of our universe, and they've determined that it doesn't align with the rate of expansion of what they expected it to be. So these hard science quantum physicists said that the solution must be that we're simply a parallel universe to the universe that Einsteinian theory would actually otherwise adhere to. So the fact that they're able to throw out casually that somehow we're living in a parallel universe, that we can have alternate existences of ourselves is...
We might be.
We might, right.
I believe we are. I think we live in a multiverse.
So
yeah.
Exactly. So I think that illustrates the creativity and imagination and really mythos of science and how they blend in a way that at the highest levels really creates excitement.
And the founder of Science House, James Jorash, is one of the most unusual and marvelous human beings that we've ever met, and that's one of the reasons why we joined Science House. Basically, Science House asked me to come and give a talk about the imagination age, and I just never left. And I remember after I gave the talk, I told Josh, I said, really, this place is unbelievable. And you know, James is a memory and chess champion. He is a stand-up improv comedian, and he is such a prolific master inventor that he's named on, you know, all of NASA for NASA's entire existence. He's got more than half as many patents that he himself is named on than all of NASA. So, I mean, he's definitely, and he's game for anything. And so, your question about, you know, how does science and the mystic and the mythic kind of match up in culture is, you know, he embodies exactly the type of leader that we've been talking about for 5 years and wondering if we would find someone in the physical world who, instead of talking about these characteristics, actually embodies these characteristics. And he does. And so, in a sense, he's sort of the new case study for the imagination age, because he practices these things and he fights like a warrior to practice these things.
I'm very, very curious to know what you think about permaculture and what you think of its potential.
Can you define what you mean by permaculture?
Yeah, it's about 20, 30 years old. It started in Australia. It speaks to designing with the land, repairing nature, living within means. It's sort of a menu for sustainability.
How does permaculture address overpopulation?
Well, that's controversial, actually. You probably hit one of the most important stuck points in permaculture these days. The guru, Bill Mollison, talks about reducing or regulating population, but he doesn't have a plan to do that. He has no strategy to bring that into control. So that's ironic that you ask about that.
That would be my sticking point. I mean, because of course, I believe that it is a necessity to, I think nature is a classroom that teaches us everything that we really need to know about how we should be living and how we can live. But I think that the problematic reality is that we live in an environment of finite resources, and so I haven't heard yet really an ethical policy for dealing with overpopulation that doesn't border on you know, terrifying. So, for example, with China, with the one-child policy, you know, inevitably, as baby girls were, let's just say, not favored, you know, as much as boys, now the population is out of whack. And so I don't see any real policy globally, even from a philosophical perspective. And in the U.S., of course, it's gotten completely out of control because the argument has been so one-sided for so long. So until we really see be some sort of philosophical first attempt to address that crisis, I'm not sure that any framework can really mitigate the crisis that's been created by overpopulation. And I'm not sitting here pretending I have an answer. I just feel like that's a major stumbling block.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add to the population crisis, Joshua?
No, I think that Rita touched on that pretty well. My concern about the population crisis is that it's the same issue I think that's been going on for the last 50 years, which is that the people who are paying attention to the population crisis are the ones who have the greatest economic control over the planet, and the ones who are to the least informed about it are those that are not in a position to economically sustain the size of the families that are being produced. And I think there's a real education issue that needs to be addressed, which is addressing ways to create manageable and viable families relative to the socioeconomic positioning of the planet.
Okay, very interesting, yes. Let's talk a little bit about story. I'm obviously writing what I call new mythology. I have 11 stories on my website. What are the most important stories about the future in your world? Who's talking about the future world in your world through story?
Well, Willi, I have to say, you may call it permaculture and we may call it the imagination age, but we have the same term for the storytelling, which is new mythology. That's also the term that we use to describe the stories. So we're right on with that one. I think it's being created collaboratively. I think one of the hallmarks of this period is that it's becoming, and this is a challenge of this period, although I enjoy this challenge, it's becoming more difficult to determine where the line is. It's sort of almost like watching a snowy day, and then the snow turns to sleet, and then it turns to rain, and then it turns back to snow again. You can't really always tell the exact moment when that process is taking place or what's responsible for changing it. Obviously temperature, but that's also true of storytelling. So I think that for me, the philosophy I've been trying to promote in that regard is that each of our lives are stories. So if we try to live in a way that we are constantly the character in a story, it gives us a different perspective on risk. It gives us a different perspective on connectivity. I believe it gives us more of a proclivity for the hero's journey. I believe also that we have to come to terms with the fact that living life as a story doesn't always mean that everything conforms to make you the star. You also have a responsibility, if you're playing a cameo in someone else's story, to make that cameo as exciting and as fulfilling for that other person's story as humanly possible, and it adds to your story. So I think we're in an adjustment period right now as we become stories, and this is true of how people communicate on Facebook, how they communicate on Twitter, and any social media really. What is the story that you're trying to tell, and where do you hope that it goes? How much of it is mysterious and beyond your control? What do you do when you're faced with sudden, unexpected circumstances? If your life is a story, you can start to look for the themes in that story or the characters who play a role in that story. And I would also just add that I think while I'm not a video game player, I spend a lot of time watching and studying people playing video games. And
okay.
One of the things I've learned is that there's always a narrative arc that you can follow. And in video games, there are players, and then there are non-player characters. So the players are the people with whom you have the meaningful interaction. But then the non-player characters are the people with whom you have to interact for whatever reason. It's transactional. But you have to still be clever about how you approach those relationships. And so I've started looking at video game narrative arcs and applying it to physical world interactions, and I think it's helpful in the storytelling process.
Okay, let's talk about initiation if we could. Campbell talks about initiation, and I'm wondering now if Science House is helping to initiate the future human.
Yes.
And how that works.
It is. The answer is yes. I think there's a huge degree of initiation within the realm of Science House. So Science House Foundation, as Josh mentioned, sparks the imagination of kids all over the world for science. And the goal there is not just to get them excited about science, but in so doing, to get them to form global collaborative teams, which is a tremendous part of the work that we do and now that we do at Science House as well.
Okay.
So then there's the Science House Network, which is made up of scientists, engineers, artists, researchers, anyone who wants to participate from all over the world. And then there's Science House Capital, and we invest in early stage science, technology, and mathematics startups. One of our companies, Quartzy, is right now at Y Combinator in the Bay Area. So, and we have a number of other companies as well. And so our hope is that the kids whose imaginations get excited for science come back one day and seek startup funding for their own businesses. And so we're approaching it from an economic and a cultural component. And there is a very, I love the word initiation to describe that process. Yes.
What socio-cultural forces are negating that positive initiation today? What's interfering with that vision of yours?
Fear. People already have formed entrenched ideas about how work is supposed to be, and so one of our major areas of focus is intergenerational collaboration, because there's just different ideas about how these processes are supposed to unfold. So we're moving from a hierarchical model of responsibility and control toward a more collaborative model. That doesn't mean that nobody's in charge. It means that the person who's in charge of, whether it's a subgroup, a group, a large group, leadership today is different than leadership used to be. And so I look at leaders as facilitators of an orchestra, responsible for drawing upon the whole membership of the group and finding some sort of balance between the role of the individual and the group so that individuals feel like they are contributing in a meaningful way, because nothing happens without the input of individuals, and at the same time that groups are able to function in a mission-based way, meaning that if a member is lost from the group due to anything, due to retirement, due to death, due to change of plans, due to different focus, that the mission remains intact while the group sort of changes, ebbs and flows. And at the same time, that each individual is made to feel like a contributing member of that mission.
Well, let's take on the small task of how capitalism needs to change. Who wants to answer that one?
You know, Rita's done the most amount of writing and thinking about that. I mean, I have some thoughts, but I'd love to hear your first comments.
Well, all human systems have sort of a double-decker effect. One is what they were at their inception, and then the other is what they become over time when humans practice them and learn how to manipulate and exploit those systems. So I believe that sometimes when we talk about concepts like capitalism, we're not really speaking about the same thing, because some people can speak about it in the sense of what it was meant to be, as if it is still that thing, and other people talk about it in its exploited form and disregard the idea that led to the formation of the system. So while capitalism is obviously a very entrenched global domineering system that has, I've done an extensive amount of writing about the effects, for example, of the relationship in the U.S. between government and corporations and major industries like the nuclear industry, and the relationship that forms between those groups. I believe we're in such a period of transformation right now that we really aren't even sure yet what's going to emerge. So at this point, I spend less time writing and thinking about the shift in capitalism and more time focusing on the system that's going to emerge, and it's going to be globally inclusive, far more, I think, than capitalism ever could be.
Okay, well, obviously the trick is London's burning and Egypt is in total chaos. That doesn't foster a platform for positive change necessarily. It goes back to your fear. So I'm just wondering how this natural capitalism, for instance, is going to come about, if you've heard about natural capitalism.
Can you describe what natural capitalism is?
Well, it's basically something coming out of the Rocky Mountain Institute, Amory Lovins. It's based in sustainability, if I can sum it up in a sentence. It's one of many flavors that are coming out. Um, but if we talk about the crash or the transition or whatever you want to call this period, the imagination age, there's a lot of disruption um, that's going to come before something settles.
Yes.
So, but Joshua, what is your take on this transition in capitalism?
Well, I think that the overarching economic evolution of the last 50 to 75 years has been pretty reliably cyclical. If you even look, you referenced the unrest in London right now, the riots in London, and we were talking about this a bit, and if you look through the history of London, every 30 years or so, there's a cycle where people's tensions rise and then burst. And that turns. It happened in the mid and early 1980s in a resistance to Margaret Thatcher. It's happening now in reaction, in large part, I think, to the severe economic cuts that they had to make in the UK in order to meet their budgets, which resulted in 20% unemployment of people under the age of 21. So these kinds of trends cycle in and out, and the unrest follows accordingly with it. So I think that there's a larger meta issue that we need to think about, which is less about the granular shifts that need to be made in economic and the overall function of the economy, because it's clearly right now the economy is in a major extreme form, and it is in the process of shifting, whether it shifts into a more egalitarian distribution of funds through the course of government policies like we had come out of the Great Depression, or it becomes even more extreme is hard to say. But I think what's really an issue is mobilizing people on a grassroots level to take responsibility and ownership for adopting an entrepreneurial spirit toward this transformative time in which we're living. And one of the things that Rita talks a lot about with the imagination age is really sort of placing the focus on a different type of where we spend our energies, and that is not in trying to train students to be industrial capitalists, but training students to be entrepreneurs. And part of the way that you teach a student how to be an entrepreneur is by infusing a confidence, fearlessness, and an ability to invest in their creativity and their imagination. And that's really, I think that the job that we're invested in right now is how do you seed an independent interest in entrepreneurialism, and not entrepreneurialism in the traditional let's make lots of money on Wall Street market, but in creative solutions to jobs, to providing for yourself, those sorts of things. And a lot of the way that students are coming out in the U.S. in particular, and I think throughout the Northern Hemisphere and European countries in particular, they're being prepared to enter into a 1950s workforce when what they need is a 21st century mindset. And that's really coming back to the imagination age. That's really why I'm so excited about Rita's philosophy of the imagination age, because I think it gives people the tools to look at reality and to look at the economy and the job reality in a different way.
And I just also want to add one sentence to this, which is, maybe this won't be one sentence, which is, it's not just coming up with ideas and being creative. I believe there's a process to creativity, and I call it the tedium of creativity. So, it's a matter of also being resilient. So this is going to be more than a sentence. You get an idea, and then it's a matter of also understanding that not every idea you have is going to be the idea that's going to make you the next Mark Zuckerberg, because of course there's a huge trend now toward young people that everybody wants to have the next Facebook. So, the reality of the situation is that it's also about developing resilience, which is a characteristic we all need in a rapidly changing world. Humanity is becoming as complex as nature, which is the first time we've really seen that. So I believe that the tedium then of going from an idea, and this is what I love about Science House, is we work at all stages of the process. So we work from the idea all the way through to the marketplace. And that is a very complex process and very difficult for people to withstand, because there's a lot of crushing disappointment along the way. So part of our, we're not Pollyanna-ish about this, but we are optimistic in the sense that if you don't remain positive, it's very difficult to motivate people to persevere with entrepreneurship.
Let's talk a little bit about your values and principles, because those are key as you move forward with Science House. Can you talk to what you value as to children and work plans and visions for the future? I'm struggling because I'm not sure how to frame this question, but just talk about values and principles for me, if you would.
Sure. I mean, children have an ability to see the world in a way that is beyond the systems that they are indoctrinated to function within over time. So children, in fact, yesterday we were looking at this incredible slideshow called Where Children Sleep, and it was children from all over the world, and it was unbelievable. It showed a picture of the child, their name, and what country they were from, and then it showed their bedrooms. And of course, many of them didn't have bedrooms. There was a Brazilian boy who slept on a couch in a junkyard, or a boy from Kenya who slept on a floor under a little beam of light coming through the hut. I mean, it was absolutely unbelievable. So children, which we all were at one time, and all of us, just the same way I was describing that pivotal day that I had, children will have pivotal experiences that spark their imagination, and they can hold on to those sparks like lifeboats as they mature and as society imposes the systems on them. And so I view my role in the lives of the young people that we interact with, and I've always felt this way, to be, in a sense, magical. Not magical like, woo, pixie dust, but magical like, life is magical. Somehow, we unfolded out of the Big Bang, and here we are, on this tiny planet. And let's not lose sight of the fact that in this cosmic mystery, we are tasked not only with functioning on the mundane level. What do you do with your garbage? How do you live in a house? How do you function as a human being in relation to other humans? But we also have a proclivity for curiosity toward the cosmic mystery. And to me, balancing the mundane and the transcendental is a hugely important part of fulfillment. And I think fulfillment is an incentive for people to get up in the morning and persevere with the next steps of their own mission, whatever that may be. And the more collective those missions become, the better off the systems that we create will be for the people who function within them.
Gotcha. And Joshua, what are your values relative to Science House values? How do they mix?
One of the things I love about Science House and Science House Foundation is the fact that while our mission on the surface, and this is an actual mission, is to ignite the imaginations of students around the world to the excitement of science and mathematics, the underlying tapestry of that is cultural collaboration. Embedded in each and every one of our projects is a cultural collaboration anchor. So, for instance, in one of our projects, which is called Micro Global Scope, where we give high-powered celestron microscopes to science teachers of 10 to 12-year-olds around the world, we have grantees in the United States, in Ecuador, in Serbia, and Thailand. Each of the classrooms uploads their discoveries to a shared website. So the students learn not only science is exciting, but science is collaborative. And I think one of the things that is at the core and heart of my personal passions and values, and where I've found that joining Science House has really met that, or complemented that passion, is the value of the importance of creating an awareness of the global, of our globally collaborative planet we live on. When I was 16 years old, I was an exchange student in Brazil, and it completely transformed my life. And the way that it transformed my life is that I realized that my universe was not just a culture of the United States, but it was a planet. It was a small blue planet, and it was a planet in which lots of different cultures share the same passions for learning, passions for art, passions for experiences. And each culture translates that through a slightly different filter, a slightly different piece of software. Might be, if you consider languages or cultural software. But we have these shared values. And once I realized on a fundamental level that each human shares that, it totally transformed the way that I saw my role on the planet, and I basically committed myself to a life of working in cultural collaboration.
Very interesting. Another one of my threads here on the planet is the sacred. So I wanted to be sure to talk to you about what is sacred to you. And I'm very interested in your feedback on that.
Well, I think that the adventure of it all and the experience of it all is so sacred to me. So each of the people along the way who play a role in the adventure that I'm having, I think it's sacred when you come into someone's life that you fulfill whatever mission it is that you're there to fulfill, and it's often very difficult to figure out what that is in the beginning. I think that life itself is sacred, and it's absolutely, the novelty of being alive it never escapes me for a second. I never take it for granted. I feel that if life is a spark between two voids, as Nabokov said, which I'm not sure that it is, but if it is, you still have the spark between the two voids, and that is sacred. But if, on the other hand, there is some constantly unfolding creative force that propels life forward forever, even if I don't know what shape I will take in that, even if my energy sort of enters that in some nebulous way that I can't determine, I still believe that each action that we take, each word that we say, is etched someplace on the transparent palms of time, and it matters somehow. Working with technology has also opened up an entirely new pathway in thought for me about creativity and creations. And I think it's also important to note we live in 2011 right now in a world that is dominated by certain views of the sacred, the Abrahamic faiths, and then you have atheists who really are only reacting to Abrahamic faiths. So when you say that you're an atheist, what you mean is that you're not Christian, Muslim, or Jewish. It doesn't mean that you don't believe in another version of a creative cosmic force. And so I think that the sacred is both deeply personal and at the same time completely universal or multiversal, depending on where you're coming from.
Brilliant. Thank you. And you, sir, what's sacred to you?
What's sacred for me, I've really benefited a lot from collaborating with Rita over the years that we've been collaborating, because she, I believe, has a very fundamental and empathetic understanding of the sacred in a way that is it really expands my thinking of it. I think that the sacred for me is the capacity for each and every human to nurture their own empathy. And that empathy isn't just an empathy for each other and understanding the situation that others are in, but empathy for themselves. And empathy for themselves doesn't mean narcissism. I think that we are in a world that is so self-congratulatory and adulatory that we're mocking it in some of the most hilarious ways. Just as a brief aside, there's a very funny Twitter account now called Humble Brag, and Humble Brag is a new term for how people they sort of apologetically compliment themselves. But you see this routinely, and I see it from people who are not just celebrities. We're in a very self-engrossed era of our society.
Well, if I could interrupt, I mean, we're all learning how to tell the story about ourselves in a way that isn't just like, today I did this, or today, I did that. And so it is very difficult to find the line, and we find this working with groups on the emerging workforce as well. What story do you tell that has value and interest to other people, and at the same time fulfills your need to articulate what it is you spend your precious time doing?
And that was going to be my second point, which is there was Rita gave a speech a couple of weeks ago in Washington, D.C. to a group of government executives and corporate executives, and she said, it's a really great line, I'll probably botch it, but the gist of it was, if you think of your life as a story, think about making it the best story ever. And that to me is a really sacred spiritual thing, because if you think about what it is that all of the sacred works and going back to Joseph Campbell are talking about. It's about the critical importance of storytelling giving us meaning. And we tend to look at it, I think, objectively as, oh, it's the other stories that are built around us. It's the scaffolding of the mythologies that have been taught to us. But what if we were our own mythology? What if the sacred, and we forget that we're a part of that. And so I don't say that with hubris as someone who is now marching down the street proud of myself, but one who tries to take each day now and approach it approaching the sacred through the prism of storytelling. How is it that I am going to make this story interesting and authentic and meaningful and full of love for this moment? And I think that's, I really am grateful for the insight that Rita has shared with me, and that we'll just accolade. We'll just humble brag Rita here on out.
Oh, okay, very nice. I'd like to end with one more question, and I'm interested in how music impacts creativity, specifically how you use music to be creative. Give me some examples of that.
Music is, music is just amazing, and it isn't just music, it's sound. Actually, Josh has been doing a lot of experiments with a platform called SoundCloud, which just enables you to record whatever you want, upload it, and share it. But what I love about SoundCloud, so you could make music, you can record yourself speaking, you can record chimes in the yard, in the wind, but it enables people to make comments right on the sound. So it appears as a bar of sound, and then you can click on the spot where you want to leave your comment. And so music is it just neurologically does it just interacts differently. It changes your brain. There's a reason why Einstein used to stop working to play the violin for a while, I think.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Joshua?
Music completely defines much of my. I think it's an incredible creative catalyst.